Hello and welcome to the Tales of Discovery project, which is a research project put together by the Faculty of Engineering and Life Sciences, supported by a Higher Education Innovation Fund. We're working with our partners here at the Dundee Heritage Trust, the Scott Polar Research Institute and the National Oceanography Centre's Discovery Collection to explore and collate the artefacts and collections related to the research vessel RRS Discovery. Discovery was the first purpose-built Antarctic research vessel by the British, and it engaged in 3 separate voyages to the Southern Ocean. The first, the 1901 British Antarctic Expedition, the second, the 1925 Discovery Investigations, and the third, the 2 separate Banzari expeditions in 1929 and 1931. So I hope you'll enjoy following us along and learning the story of this ship. At the beginning of the 20th century, wooden shipbuilding had pretty much faded from normal practice. Instead, we were building lots of iron-hulled ships, and steam power was the norm. Discovery needed to be different. Discovery needed to be a wooden-hulled ship because we couldn't yet build iron ships that could withstand the pressures of ice that Discovery would experience in Antarctica. Dundee Shipbuilders Company was commissioned to build a ship in the tradition of Dundee steam whalers. These were ships that we already knew could work very well in the cold of the Northern and Southern Oceans and could deal with the ice that they encountered on their normal whaling voyages. But this also tells us quite a lot about the building tradition of what would become the UK's research vessels. Discovery was the first bespoke research ship built by Britain. And that legacy of Arctic and Antarctic whaling follows that ship throughout its life and influences the other ships that were used for Antarctic exploration in the following decades. Over the course of all the different expeditions that Discovery is involved in, the crew spent a huge amount of time on and in the ship. The first expedition is probably the best example of this. It's a really long voyage down to Antarctica, followed by several years trapped in the ice. In all that time, on all those different voyages, as people are working on, living on, and otherwise engaged with their work, the ship becomes an archaeological site to us. This is very much a time-bound, place-bound thing, building up a repository of material culture, of other useful artifacts, and of the residues of those people's lives. That's why we're really interested in the ship as a site and in the collection here at the Dundee Heritage Trust and our other partner organisations.
Here at Dundee Heritage Trust, we care for and manage the RRS Discovery and the associated polar collections. So the polar collections we have about 2,300, 2,400 objects within the polar collection. Obviously, we can't put them all on display. So they range from personal effects to archives, photographs, scientific instruments and the specimens found on the expeditions.
To scan some of the objects within the collections, we're using a structured light scanner like this one here. The structured light scanner pretty much projects a light onto the object like this plate here, and the cameras integrated in the light scanner, they're recording the pattern of the 3-dimensional shape of the plate, and the software can detect each single deformation on this plate and creates a perfect digital twin of the plate that we have recorded. Now, these structural light scanners are fantastic for recording artifacts of various heritage objects within the collections because they create a highly accurate and very, very detailed digital twin that we can not only archive, but also visualize and query afterwards. For the largest object in the collection, the RRS Discovery itself, it would not be possible to scan the entire ship from its keel to the top of its rigging with a handheld structured light scanner. Instead, a laser scanner is used. This device captures millions of discrete data points using laser infrared technology, producing really accurate measurements of the ship. This replaces the traditional way of recording ships, which would consist of weeks of measuring and photographing the entire ship, inside and out. Whereas today, with a laser scanner, we can do all of this in only a few days. Big ships like the Discovery are really complex shapes and difficult to record, so the application of laser scanning technology allows these important heritage sites to be recorded quicker, cheaper, and in much higher detail than ever before.
As well as laser scanning the hull, we needed to find a way to record the mast and the rigging, which we can't reach with the laser scanner itself because it's obviously quite a long way up in the air. So to do this, we used a drone. And our drone survey consisted of both a photogrammetric survey, which takes a series of photographs and uses an algorithm to stitch them together and create a 3D model. And it also used a LiDAR survey, which captured accurate elevation data sets of the mast and the rigging allowing us to really get that detail in how that part of the ship was put together. We can use this as a complementary data set to the data we've already taken from the hull using the laser scanner, and these can be combined to ensure a highly accurate model of the entirety of the ship without a weird stitch in between. The models we've generated from the data we've collected allow us as maritime archaeologists, but also ship scientists and people interested in heritage conservation to explore this ship in a way that we couldn't have done before and that we couldn't do with any of the other means at our disposal. The 3D model we've made allows us to look at the arrangement of space within the ship and look at how the different rooms and compartments interconnect and relate to one another, and also allows us to follow certain structural elements through the ship itself. We can then look at how that ship has survived in the dry dock, so we're really interested in what is currently happening to the ship in the scope of its refurbishment and repair, and understanding how the changes may have happened from a ship that's sat in a dry dock for a number of years with no sort of water around it to support it.
The digital ship that's being created represents the current state of the ship, which can then be compared to the original drawing plans from her original construction in 1900 or from the major refit beginning in 1923. These plans allow us to reconstruct structural elements and compare these to the modern day digital version. Not only can this show how the ship has changed over time, it also allows us to better understand key aspects of the ship, such as a hull design, rudder, and propeller performance. Such models permit testing using computer simulations or practical hydrodynamic experiments to reconstruct how the ship handled the wide range of sea conditions she encountered in her expeditions.
All of these things mean we can start to open up some really interesting new stories of the ship and explore the kind of hidden expeditions behind that famous one in 1901 when it first went to the Antarctic. Because this ship's had a really varied, really complex life and has made really major impacts on our understanding of the Southern Oceans, Antarctic research, and this whole sort of field of environmental science and exploration. So the ongoing potential for this data set really is quite massive.
This project to 3D scan the collection is fantastic. It's allowed us to develop some of our objects and create digital twins of them, and we're really excited about the possibilities of what we can do with that. It means we can make our objects, 3D objects, available via our online catalogue to members of the public.
One of the collections we're interested in is held here at the Scott Polar Research Institute in Cambridge. So today we're going to visit that collection and record some of the artefacts that it holds to connect them back to the work we did at the Dundee Heritage Trust.
The Scott Polar Research Institute was founded in 1920 by Frank Debenham, and he was the geologist on Scott's second expedition to the Antarctic, the Terra Nova expedition. And basically Debenham had wanted a place where he and other polar people could come together to talk about their polar experiences and to go through the data that they collected on expeditions. And he also wanted to have a place where they could bring their kit as kind of a library of things that worked and things that didn't work. And so our collection here at the Polar Museum began as that teaching collection. It was a place where people could come and learn about exploration in the polar regions and the kinds of technologies that did and didn't work. And they could also talk to other polar experts about the research that they'd done and the data that they'd collected.
Here at the Scott Polar Research Institute, we've recorded the parts of the collection that we were interested in, focused on the voyage of discovery, and started to forge those connections to the work we did at the Dundee Heritage Trust on RRS Discovery itself. We've drawn out some of the human stories and the aspects of the collection that we're really interested in understanding what is different about what's held here at the SPRI versus what was held at the Dundee Heritage Trust. Our next step is to have a look at the parts of the scientific collection held at the National Oceanography Centre in Southampton.
The National Oceanography Centre, opened in Southampton in 1996, is at the forefront of British ocean science. It maintains two of the current fleet of Royal Research ships, the James Cook and Discovery. This Discovery is the fourth RRS to bear its name, making it the great-grandchild of the one housed in Dundee.
Now, within the National Oceanography Centre, this warehouse houses the Discovery collections.
We've been collecting samples that make up this collection since 1925. Now, that was begun with the Discovery investigations, which went to the Southern Ocean and collected some of the oldest samples that we have in this collection. There's over 70,000 jars and samples here in the Discovery Collections building in Southampton, and they are used by scientists who come from all over the world to study taxonomy, natural history, morphology, genetics, and all myriad of things that we can understand about a specimen.
The wet samples in the Discovery collection provide significant challenges for existing 3D digitisation techniques. The liquid in the jars reflects light, preventing the structured light scanner from accurately scanning the specimen inside, while the glass jar and liquid combined lead to distortions of any images taken, therefore limiting the ability to create accurate models through photogrammetry. An alternative approach was therefore needed, which took inspiration from a technique more commonly used in marketing photography. Using this technique, samples are placed in a lightbox upon a turntable, and then 36 photos are taken 10 degrees apart on each rotation, with 4 rotations at different angles to get a full 3-dimensional appearance of this object. This approach permits viewing of the samples from all angles as if the sample specimen was in front of you, in a pseudo 3D manner, which can then be hosted online and made publicly accessible.
Now, in addition to the Discovery collections here at Southampton National Oceanography Centre, we also have the National Oceanographic Library.
The library started out as part of the Discovery Committee. It was part of the Discovery Investigations. It was based up in London at Queen's Anne Gate. So here we have a lot of the photographs that were taken. We have a lot of the scientific logbooks in our collection, and a lot of the committee papers setting up the committee, setting up the investigations.
So, I hope you've enjoyed seeing the different collections and the work we've been doing there. What we've actually done in the course of this is really create quite a complex, messy data set of different things. Lots of different types of data, lots of different types of artifacts, lots of things and people and events that we need to now somehow reconcile into one narrative and one way of accessing all this information across all these different collections. So this is an example of what we made, this spreadsheet here. It is quite busy. There is quite a lot of information. We can draw this into a tool like Wikidata. And what this allows us to do is create an individual item for each person or thing or event that is in the ship RRS Discovery's life. All of these things are treated the same way, which gives us a really good level of parity across the data set to treat them and link them. And effectively what we're doing is building a directory from which you can link to other parts of the internet or to other collections. And it allows us to, rather than duplicate the work that's already been done by our partners in cataloging and describing these data sets, we can just say, right, if you're interested in Robert Falcon Scott's story, you can start here and we can tell you where all the things related to Scott on Discovery are held. And we can also hopefully take you to the individual page on that museum's website to tell you more about it. You'll also be able to access the models that we made as part of this work. So the 3D model of Discovery, for example, will be accessible through the item list on Wikidata that is for Discovery. By doing this, we've been able to unify a collection. Even though they're all held at individual institutions and museums, you're able to see them as one whole thing associated with this ship.
So, in conclusion, through the work we've done through this whole project, whether that's the days we spent surveying this vessel, recording the artifacts within the different collections of our partners, the Dundee Heritage Trust, the Scott Polar Research Institute, or the National Oceanography Centre, all the work we've done to try and link those things together, we've come to a point where we have a unified collection that talks of Britain's legacy of Antarctic research. The results from this allow us to have, rather than 3 individual collections siloed from one another, working together but not really as accessible as they could be, to one single, unified, linked data set that we can look at the ship, the archaeological and historical collections, but also a scientific collection that is still relevant to our work today. All of that means we're left with one contained understanding of Britain's legacy of Antarctic exploration from 1901 right through to the present day. We can link the Discovery I'm sitting on now to Discovery 4, the vessel that works out of the NOC. We can link the results that are found during the expeditions, the various expeditions that this Discovery voyaged on, with the results from not only Discovery today, but other work being done in the Antarctic. And all of that means that we have a stronger, better understanding of what these people went through and what the result of their sacrifice was. not every story of Antarctic exploration is one of knowledge gain and success and heroism. There's also bitter disappointment, defeat, pain and death. But ultimately, we are left with a better understanding of our world. And the work we've done here lets us get a closer and better understanding of the people that gave us that knowledge.